Hello and welcome to another TLDR US video. The Biden administration is now approaching 2 weeks old, with those first days bringing a slew of executive orders. President Biden is unsurprisingly trying to move quickly. This largely because he has an absolutely massive to-do list, and failure to complete some parts of his list would have disastrous consequences. Few modern presidents have faced such an imminent crisis on day one, and having campaigned on his experience and governing capabilities, Biden faces immense pressure not to stumble. But it's going to be hard. So today we're going to take a look at what stands in his way, and what Biden plans to do in the first 100 days of his presidency. Before we start, if you want to support the channel, then you can check out the TLDR Patreon. If you sign up, you get a whole bunch of perks, including exclusive live events, behind-the-scenes posts, thanks in videos, and early access to videos. You also get to know that you're helping to support a small, independent, non-partisan news channel, and helping our growth. The link to the Patreon is just under the like button, so thanks for your support. The idea of a president's first 100 days has been around for nearly a century. The concept was first aired by President Franklin Roosevelt in the first year of his own presidency, and ever since, America and the world has put intense focus on the first 3 months of a new president's term. Back in 1933, Roosevelt was able to pass 76 bills, helping to fight the Great Depression that at the time was still in full swing. Roosevelt's 76, though, would prove to be the outlier, not the rule, in this new measurement of presidential success. And given the divided state of Congress, it's unlikely that Biden will be able to meet similar heights. That said, this early time in his presidency does give him a few advantages, the main one being that new presidents usually experience a honeymoon period of high approval ratings and a broad willingness to change things up. He also doesn't have to pass 76 bills right now to be a success. In order to keep America from collapsing, he only needs to do a few things. The problem is that those things are no small orders. The majority of Biden's promises for his first 100 days have fallen into two general categories: coronavirus and everything else, with priority heavily given to the former. This, given the, everything going on at the moment, shouldn't be too surprising. Getting some form of handle on the pandemic is the most basic, but also one of the most complicated issues that Biden will have to deal with in the coming months, and if his administration slips, they will fall, and fall badly. So what does he want to do in the first 100 days related to COVID? The easiest goal to measure here, and the one that the administration seems to be placing at the top of the priority list, is that Biden wants to have 100 million Americans vaccinated by day 101 of his presidency. Unfortunately though, this won't be as simple as pulling a few million people off the street and jabbing a needle into their arm. Over the past month, vaccine rollout and administration has been a slow and gradual process. That being said, the US is currently on pace to meet Biden's target, but not by a huge margin. And obviously, politics aside, more vaccines in less time is always good. Plus there's the fact that things may get complicated as we increase the numbers here. Localities are already struggling to speed up vaccinations in communities, due to the short notice they often receive that a new shipment of shots is on the way, leaving them with little time to inform people who may be eligible that they can get their shot. But still, 100 million in 100 days is pretty good, and looking achievable at the moment. But because of that, Biden is now facing pressure to increase the goal, and given everything happening, one can see why. If we can do 100 million, then why not aim for 150 or 200 million? These numbers are looking increasingly possible as the US gets its feet under itself, and Biden and his team are planning accordingly. Already, the Chief of Staff has been doing the media rounds promoting the idea that the 100 million number is more of a minimum than the actual end goal for these first few months. And Biden himself has already said that he expects to reach 150 million by day 100. Along with the vaccination effort, Biden has stated that he wants a majority of schools to be reopened by the end of the first 100 days, a timeline that would conveniently see them open just in time for students to be sent home again over the summer. Jabs aside, providing schools the resources to safely hold in-person classes is a top priority for many on both sides of the aisle, possibly paving the way for bipartisan cooperation in the coming weeks. This, however, does not mean that Biden will be able to push forward here without opposition or difficulty, though. Many, especially in the education world, have expressed skepticism of the plan, asserting that such a timeline puts politics above practicalities of safety in schools. After all, the Trump administration also wanted schools to open their doors back up, and look how that ended up going in 2020. That said, Biden has clearly shown himself more willing to commit spending that schools will actually need to be able to reopen, as opposed to some in politics who have tried to push schools to reopen doors through sheer force, without regard for the safety of students or faculty. But so far, we've only really talked about what's going on in Biden's COVID plans. So now let's take a look at some of the other pieces of legislation he's eyeing up. The first is immigration. Biden has many times now described a desire to get a broad immigration reform bill through Congress before the end of April, which, given that immigration was one of the signature issues of his predecessor, shouldn't be too surprising. High on the list of the things that Biden wants to see reformed are the previous administration's policies of making asylum seekers from Mexico wait for their immigration legal proceedings in Mexico, and the policy of metering said asylum seekers, i.e. limiting, often drastically, the number of asylum seekers that are allowed across the border each day. It should be noted that asylum metering is not the same as general immigration restrictions. It specifically limits the number of asylum seekers, people fleeing unsafe conditions in their home countries. Though these are not particularly radical changes, getting a broad immigration bill through Congress, and by Congress we mostly mean the Senate, would be a tedious affair. This is going to be a hard piece of legislation for Biden's team to drag through the process, which is why it likely hasn't been emphasised as much as other pieces of his agenda. In a similarly reform-minded vein is Biden's promise to begin work on racial progress and the criminal justice system. The president has promised to create a National Police Oversight Commission in an effort to boost police accountability and generally try and stop the shooting of innocent people of colour. This commission will work with him to try and develop legislation that does actual work in reforming police practices across the country. At least so Biden hopes. He's also advocated for the rapid passing of the Safe Justice Act, which would reform aspects of the justice system in an attempt to make them more racially equitable. It also includes increased funding for community-based policing, a strategy which Biden himself has been a personal long-time advocate for. The final aspect of Biden's first 100-day plan that we should mention here is an abundance of simple actions that can be dealt with via executive order. Many of the first 100-day promises the now president made during the campaign trail fall into this category. He promised a variety of moves, ranging from repealing the ban on openly transgender people serving in the military to rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement. And given that many of those only require a stroke of a pen, he's already achieved quite a few of them. This is something we covered in more depth in our video discussing Biden's first day in office, for which there's a link in the description if you want to check that out. For the sake of knowing what to expect over the next 90-something days, just keep in mind that although Biden's made a lot of promises, not a ton of them require congressional approval. Many of the high-profile promises that Biden's made can be quickly signed, and quite a few already have been. Among these were the aforementioned repeal of the transgender military ban and the rejoining of the Paris Accord, as well as things like revoking the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline, ending Trump's Muslim ban, and ending the Justice Department contracts with private prisons. Anyway, we'll be coming back to this list in a few months' time to see how well Biden's done at getting his policies implemented. The first 100 days are often seen as an indicator for how the rest of the presidency will go, and given the tumultuous state of affairs at the moment, the next 90-something days will likely hold even more importance than the first 100 days of Biden's predecessors. If you want to see the video in 100 days' time where we see how Biden actually did, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible, and if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.